This week on Supercars Talk, I review the Bet Easy Darwin Triple Crown. This weekend, after many years of waiting, we finally saw the Triple Crown won by Scott McLaughlin. Perfect score over the weekend, both poles, both race wins. First off though, a little bit of paperwork to get going. Richie Stanaway was out for the weekend. Chris Pither took over again. Once again, did a pretty good job over the weekend. A little bit interesting on that vehicle, they still had Stanaway's name on the windscreen, which obviously on the window you have to have the driver's name. But this year the Boost Mobiles decided they want to, kind of increase the driver profiles for the team. Part of the reason why they switched out Tander for Stanaway. I think I'm going to get into this a bit in a video in the next few weeks while I've got a bit of a break. So this year, to bring up the driver profiles, like on the side of the truck, they've got the driver photos. And then across the windscreen, like they used to in the old days, just across there, there's a good example. Alex Rouleau, because they had no sponsorship, they've got that there, or like we've got Erebus and then Preston High, things like that. They've put the drivers' names across there. Now, what I found interesting, they had a bit of time, they had a bit of notice. They didn't change it from Stanaway to Pither. Just a bit of housekeeping. But I'd hate to say it, but a more professional team would have changed it. You see the likes of Red Bull when you have the additional co-driver sessions and things like that, they'll actually have, say like Lowndes or Tander on the rear window instead of the normal driver. It's not much, but it's just a little bit of something there, could be doing better. Speaking of windscreen banners, over the weekend, actually double picking on this team, one of my favourite teams to follow, Erebus. Across the windscreen, I still don't know what the sponsor was. On Friday they actually had a white background and some black writing, and the black writing, it was very thin. You could not read it. I did notice for Saturday they'd changed it, they had a black background, and I think it was red writing on there, but same kind of, it looked a lot better on the Saturday and Sunday with the black background, but still couldn't read the writing, kind of what's the point. And then they actually, on the front of the kind of there where the seat chrome is on the Preston car there, they had another sponsor that I couldn't make out what it was. The opposite, probably the lettering was too fat, and on TV couldn't make out what it was. A bit pointless. While picking on windscreen banners as well, on the Milwaukee Will Davison's Red 23 car, the sponsor had on the windscreen, the car's predominantly red. The car, the windscreen banner had an orange background that just looked wrong to the rest of the car. Okay, granted, the sponsor's colours probably were with that orange background, but, orange to red, it's not too far out, to tie it in with the rest of the car, just would have looked a lot neater. Yeah, the sponsors pay the bills, but, sometimes, to make it look like a cohesive paint job, maybe a bit of give and take. Just another quick note on sponsorship over the weekend. I'm not sure how many people picked this up, but it looked like Anton De Pasquale, across the front on his helmet there, it looked like he had a Rich Energy logo. For those of you who don't know, it's questionable whether they're an energy drink or not. They're sponsoring the Haas team in Formula 1 this year. They're in a bit of trouble over their logo. Apparently it's copied off a bicycle brand's logo. Yeah, there's a bit of a question over that, but interesting. It looked like the logo was on Anton's helmet, nothing kind of said about it. We'll see if anything kind of comes of it. Probably the big talking point before the weekend was though, Holden had a parity adjustment. Okay, if anybody needed a parity adjustment, I would have thought it would have been Nissan, but apparently Holden what they changed, the front under tray, the bit that's under the front of the car, I think it lips up a little bit. And then they actually changed the degrees on the rear wing. They actually put that down a little bit so you could run it a little bit flatter. Did it make a difference? Well, you know, Erebus was the best of the rest. Triple Eight seemed lost. Although Triple Eight have come out and claimed that Jamie's car, or the chassis was broken. Apparently there's a crack in a weld somewhere. Bit interesting. And what's scary is that supposedly they found this crack on Saturday night, and Jamie's was the faster car out of the two. So if his broken car is at that speed, what the hell's going on with Van Gisbergen's car? Because he's basically nowhere. And even like Jamie came from kind of about last on Sunday. I think he ended up finishing 5th. So where Van Gisbergen was just kind of nowhere all weekend. The once great House of Eights getting shown up by the little team that could Erebus. So yeah, interesting to see whether this kind of form continues into Townsville, because they did take a big step forward, it seemed, at Winton, and this weekend they seem to kind of go backwards again. Having said that though, if Tickford's results weren't so good, Triple Eight will be looking relatively a lot better, but kind of Tickford seems, you know, kind of they've got all 4 cars kind of firing on all cylinders at the moment, nearly all kind of firing, a few little team errors and things like that, but they're definitely, as a group, they're doing a lot better than what they have the previous few years, where they seem to maybe get 1 or 2 cars each weekend towards the front. Now they're kind of, if we take out the 2 Penske cars, Tickford's, you know, now they've kind of, you know, they have got the 4 cars, and basically the 4 cars were running in the top 10 all weekend. So for the racing over the weekend, yes, there was actually some racing. Yeah, on Saturday, after the first couple of laps, yeah, it all kind of flowed in, and we kind of, you know, knew all day who was going to be the winner. We had the interesting one, Rick unloading Slady. Rick ended up getting a penalty for it, seemed pretty clear cut. Apparently Slade did lift off for some reason, don't know why, but that's why it probably seemed a lot worse than what it was. BJR had that car to fix, and also there was no real replays of it, but Macaulay Jones got spun around on the first lap and did a fair bit of damage to that car. I was surprised they did get it out for the rest of the race, because it looked pretty bad. You know, the rear suspension was on the ground and things like that as he went back to the pits. They got it back up and running, and out he went. Slady's car was a late night for them to fix. We also got to see Winterbottom have a crack at Andre Heimgartner. The initial kind of replay was like another typical half kind of Winterbottom pass, and then he got launched up in the air. When you saw different camera angles though, he was a fair way up. Heimgartner kind of shut the door a bit of a Heimgartner move, but yeah, nothing kind of eventuated from it. You know, racing incident, we all kind of play on for the rest of the day. The only other real incident for the race was when Davison got let out of the pits into the side of Dave Reynolds. So at the time they were kind of fighting for what turned out to be 3rd position. So Phil Mundy's turned around. Phil Mundy's the owner of the racing entitlements contract that this car raced under. It's not actually a Tickford car, but I call it the 4th Tickford car. It is a customer car. So Phil Mundy, who's the boss, he turned around and said he was going to, or he thought about appealing the decision. Now, unfortunately, they made the call. Davo took off. He crashed into the side of Dave Reynolds. So now he did back off and let him go. This is where I think maybe we could have a bit of adjustment in the rule. The way it is at the moment, it's pretty clear cut. If you get let go, you crash into the side of someone, well, it was unsafe. And if, you know, you had, I think Penske and Triple Eight and Tickford guys in the pits in, well, it wouldn't have been the Tickford, yeah, it was the other Tickford team, you know, and the Penske Triple Eight guys in front. If if it had been under safety car when we all barrel into the pits together and try and crash each other that way, if it had been under those conditions where you had a lot of other cars in the pits and you're trying to run too wide, well, that is very dangerous. So this is where it's hard to kind of, change the rules on this one, where you've got guys going into side of each other. We did see Scotty was released and Jack Smith was coming down the pit lane. They quickly told Scott, no, merge in behind, or, something to that effect. And there was no accident. Whereas, Tickford at the moment, they seem to have a bit of history with letting cars go into other cars. This one luckily was into the side, not across the front of it. But, still penalty deserved. Maybe we need to look at tweaking the rules and, maybe a bit of flexibility, so that if you do hit someone but you pull in behind and it's not, crew members aren't in danger or anything, maybe give them a 5-second penalty or something. 15 seems pretty harsh. What I did find funny about this, though, Phil Mundy was saying that it stopped them from having a chance to try and get on the podium. Now, Davo finished, 9th in the race, and then when the results were corrected, it was something like 12th. That's a long way from a podium that your unsafe release didn't stop. At the time, yes, they were fighting for, Reynolds ended up 3rd, but it's, maybe if Davison had finished 4th and then he got relegated, maybe you could start talking about, it affected our podium chances, things like that. But, 9th is a long way back from the podium. I'm sorry, you got no defence on that one, Phil. So on Sunday we had the interesting qualifying session with my Foxtel actually dropped out. I think probably everyone's did at the time. And we, dropped out for about 20 seconds and came back, and we've got 2 Brad Jones cars in the wall, and you think, how the hell have they hit each other? Then we start looking at the replays, and Percat goes off. Looks like a case of, I hit 2 pedals at once, whoops. And then Macaulay did he go off in sympathy or something, If the car wasn't damaged enough yesterday, we'll have another crack at it. Quite an interesting situation there. But one thing, these supercars are unbelievable. Like, we saw, I haven't watched all of it from last weekend, the TCR racing, and they had a little dust up on the first lap, and apparently one of the Hondas might be a write-off now. These guys, the car, like Percat's car was trashed. That went in hard. And then a couple of hours later, it's out on the grid, and he was going around bashing people during the race, as he kind of likes to do. So, big weekend for the BJR boys. Had to rebuild Slade's car, Percat's car, and Macaulay Jones' car twice. So I think they'll be going down to Albury pretty quickly, pull everything apart, make sure it's all square and that. Build a whole new, inventory of spare parts, and then they've got to get up to Townsville. So at least it's not next weekend, they've got a little bit of time to do it. Hell of a workload for those guys though. So I do feel a bit sorry for the boys who would have had a late Saturday night and then worked their asses off on Sunday to get them ready for the race. And now they've got to go back and, probably fully strip 3 cars and, check everything on them and put them back together again. But, that's what happens. So during the race, not too much happened. Scott was on pole again, Scott won, This is how it goes this year. He wins the Triple Crown, Everyone at Penske's happy. All the other drivers seem a bit sad, including, I think Fabian's not so happy at Penske, but everybody else there seems to be in a pretty joyous state. So, that's pretty much all to say about the race. We did actually, I have been critical of Fabian and his passing abilities. We saw one of those Bunnings power pass power plays. Can we please name it something? It just sounds stupid. But Fabian actually, he had a pass on Anton going through the last corner. Set it up really nicely, kind of surprised him, went through cleanly. It was a job well done, like credit where credit's due. And I think that really was a power pass, power play. Some of those that we've seen over the telecast over the last couple of rounds, you know, it's just a pass kind of thing. They've probably got to get so many in on the telecast to get the Bunnings name out there. But this one, really good job, Fabian. I'll give you that one. So, quick look at the championship points. It's nearly over now. We have Scott on 1,946 points. His teammate Fabian Coulthard, 319 points behind. I've gone on about this before. 300 points is the amount of points for a weekend. So over the weekends, you 150 points for each win. And then when we go to, you know, Bathurst and Sandown, they get 300 points for the win there. So Scott could effectively now sit out a whole weekend, and he's still in championship lead. And, you know, it's only his teammate Coulthard there. Dave Reynolds, 450 points adrift from Scott. He's in third. That's 1.5 weekends behind. So essentially, Scott, you know, he'd still be second in the championship if he sat out 1.5 rounds now. And then it gets even worse. Chaz is fourth, and he's 546 behind. Shane Van Gisbergen, 547. And I think Whincup is in sixth, and he's only a couple behind Shane Van Gisbergen. So kind of, if you take out, well, the top three, you know, kind of from fourth down, it's pretty close. But even like Dave Reynolds is starting to streak away from the rest of the guys. You know, he's 100 points up on the next there as well. So I hate to say we're only halfway through the championship. It's yeah, it's looking pretty strong for Scotty. Probably going to be a Penske one too, and yeah, you know, kind of Dave's leading the rest. Something could happen at Bathurst, you know. Both Penske cars could have a vote at Bathurst or something, and all of a sudden the whole thing turns around. But you know, it's probably a big ask to you know, for both of them to have such high bad luck like that, and to think if they've done this much in the first half of the season, they don't seem to be slowing down at all. Like Scott wasn't doing it easy over the weekend. It's not like Fabian's finishing second in every race, but you know, Scott was it was daylight to second, you know. He was about 13 seconds up on Reynolds, and, you know, he probably, if he really needed to, he probably could have stretched it a bit further, you know, really opened it up and went for it. So that's my wrap up of the Bet Easy Darwin Triple Crown. The Triple Crown was won. Wasn't Fernando Alonso, it was Scott McLaughlin, and he's taken it up in Darwin. Over the next couple of weeks, probably do a couple of little features. Might have a bit of a look at the, you know, the Boost Mobile kind of Gary Rogers Motorsport, you know, the predicament they were in. Go a bit in depth in that, because I see a lot of comments that, you know, I think people are quite ill-informed on what it takes to run one of these teams. So I'll try and clear that up a bit. If you've got any questions or, you know, comments, you want to correct me on anything, you know, kind of, most of this stuff's off the top of my head. I do write some notes during the race, but you know, a lot of the stuff's from my memory, which is getting a little bit fuzzy as I get older. I've got a lot of other things up there to try and remember. So, you know, down in the comments there, you know, ask any questions, you know, leave some comments. You know, if you like what I'm doing, say some good things. If you don't like it, well, tell me you don't like it, how I can improve, things like that. But I'd love to hear some feedback. Until next time, I'll see you later.
Put away your inhibitions, let the beast in you just get loose. We all young, wild, and